Good morning, everyone. I want to begin just a few brief introductory remarks by thanking the Victor Center for the Prevention of Jewish Genetic Diseases and Debbie Hirschman, the National Director of the Victor Center, for what has been just the most dedicated work in preparing for the Rabbinical Assembly Convention, providing for Jewish screening here over the last day or so, as we've been speaking about since we arrived here in Atlanta, and for their work every single day in enhancing the lives of Jewish families. I have the great privilege this morning of introducing to all of you Randy Gold. I hadn't met Randy before this morning, but I've heard a lot about him from my work with Jewish genetic diseases, from my own personal point of view, which I've spoken about, but also just by a national reputation, which I will introduce to you in just a moment. Randy's and his wife, Carolyn, had their lives dramatically changed in August of 2008. Their daughter, Eden, an 18-month-old child, was diagnosed with ML4, a horrible and preventable Jewish genetic disease. Carolyn and Randy were devastated by the diagnosis and by the news that they received because they had been screened for Jewish genetic diseases themselves. But they eventually learned that they had only been screened for 8 of the 19 known preventable Jewish genetic diseases. They had been long-time Jewish community activists before the diagnosis of Eden. And the Golds again wanted to use their activism, their love for the Jewish community, for Jewish people, to immediately find a way of responding to their own challenges in their lives. The Golds founded the Jewish Gene Screen, and they found a funder. The funder was the Marcus Foundation. The project is led by the Victor Center for the Prevention of Jewish Genetic Disease, and Jewish Screen promotes the awareness among rabbis, doctors, and young couples about the need for screening for all 19 of the known Jewish genetic, Ashkenazi Jewish genetic diseases. The organization is now only in its second year, and to know how quickly something that is worthwhile can have an impact, you need to know just a little bit about the history of Jewish Gene Screen. The organization has participated already in hundreds of events, met with doctors and with rabbis from across the community. What's happened just in one community here in Atlanta is that Jewish gene screening has increased by 400%. To me, that is an amazing number. It is a number that gives me not only comfort, but great inspiration. Through Jewish Gene Screen, the Golds are creating a new norm. It's one that I spoke of on Monday night at Avat Achim. The norm that every rabbi will mention screening in his or her premarital counseling with a couple. The new norm that every doctor will offer screening to his or her patients. The new norm that every couple knows that they need to get tested for the 19 known preventable diseases before they walk down the aisle or before they have their first child. Both Carolyn and Randy Gold are frequent speakers about Jewish genetic disease awareness. The success of the Jewish Gene Screen was measured in a very dramatic way. Randy and Carolyn were recognized internationally when they were named as the Jewish Federations of North America 2011 Jewish Heroes. Carolyn and Randy serve on the board of the ML4 Foundation, a foundation that is working very hard to find a cure for Eden's disease as is the Familial Dysautonomia Foundation, working hard to extend the life of children with dysautonomia like my grandson, and hopefully someday to find a cure. The Golds live here in Atlanta with their 6-year-old son, Nathaniel, with their daughter, Eden, who is now 4, and with Shai, who was born in February of 2012. It's not just that people have difficult challenges in their lives. It's a question of what you do when you have that challenge. What can you do for yourself, and what can you do for others? To me, truly, Randy, Carolyn is not here this morning, but Randy and Carolyn are Jewish heroes. They're my heroes for what they do, because they show a care for other people. They take their own needs and their own situation, and they ask the question, how can we help others? They've already touched so many lives, enhanced so many families, and I hope that they will continue their work to continue to inspire us, to remind us of the power that we have in our hands as rabbis to be able to influence the lives of couples and to transform the condition of future children through our efforts. It's my pleasure, my privilege to introduce to you Randy Gold.
Thank you, Rabbi Lebeau. We share a bond that we wish we didn't share. But it's so touching to hear from someone who, for as many years as you, have been dealing with an issue of Jewish genetic disease. And I appreciate your comments very much. They're very, very kind. And I look forward to more time together so we can solve this problem of Jewish genetic diseases. Thank you all for having me today. I want to thank Rabbi Josh Heller. Hi, Rabbi. Rabbi Neil Sandler, who is also here, and my dear friend, Rabbi Marshall Lisak, who all asked me to come and share our story this morning. I want to also acknowledge my rabbi who is here today, Rabbi Adam Starr, who is one of the leading rabbis in the country on this issue of Jewish genetic diseases. You should all just know that a week and a half ago, there was a screening for Jewish genetic diseases at Rabbi Starr's synagogue, my synagogue, Young Israel of Toco Hills here in Atlanta, and we screened over 130 people in one day, which is pretty incredible. So if you have questions from the rabbinic standpoint about this issue, Rabbi Starr is a fantastic person to reach out to. I was originally scheduled to speak yesterday when Rabbi Heller said, can you come and talk to us? I think Tuesday will be the day. I understand that there was another speaker that you all felt was more important to hear from than me. And I don't mind being bumped by the president, but the vice president? I mean, come on. I was asked to speak about how one family can change a community. And Caroline and I are not satisfied changing a community, and we are well on our way to changing the world on this issue of Jewish genetic diseases. Now, I can hear some of you out there already saying, don't we know enough, or don't we know what we're supposed to know about Jewish genetic diseases already? I mean, we've known Rabbi Lebeau for 25, 30 years. He talks about it all the time. Well, sadly, the answer is no. You don't know everything you need to know about Jewish genetic diseases. And if the answer was yes, I wouldn't have a child with a Jewish genetic disease. So let me just start by asking you, how many of you here have created something, formed something, or founded something in your life? How many? Almost all of you. And how many of you actually believe that one person can change the world? How many of you actually believe that? Just about all of you. I think my job here is done then. There's nothing more for me to say. Well, I'll tell you from my perspective, I believe that we create things every single day. And Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik writes in Halachic Man that the most fundamental principle of all is that man must create himself. The emphasis on choice and freedom, responsibility, is one of the most distinctive features of Jewish thought. And in fact, we introduced this concept to the world. Other religions believe in a defined path or an original sin. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the chief rabbi of England, notes that God has no form. God cannot be delineated or defined. God transcends nature and therefore is free and unbound by nature's laws. So by creating us, B'Tselem Elohim, in God's image, God gave us similar freedoms. We are the only beings capable of being creative. So as you heard already, Caroline and I have been longtime community activists. And so we knew that before we got married, we should be screened for Jewish genetic diseases. So I went to my Jewish doctor, and he screened me for 2 diseases. Caroline went to her Jewish doctor, and he screened her for 8 diseases. We weren't a match for any of the diseases, so we thought no problem. We have a healthy 6-year-old son, Natanel, and we have a daughter who's 4. Her name is Eden. Shortly after Eden's diagnosis, we realized she wasn't meeting her milestones. She wasn't rolling over, she wasn't sitting up, she wasn't doing all the things she was supposed to do. And our pediatrician said, "Oh, don't worry, she'll be fine. She'll progress at her own rate. Don't compare her to your son." And it didn't feel right. She wasn't progressing. Her eyes were crossed, and we thought, well, maybe that's the reason she's not progressing. So we did 2 surgeries to try and correct her crossed vision, her crossed eyes. That didn't help. At 9 or 10 months, we started physical therapy for Eden. Still, she wasn't making progress. At 15 months, we said, you know what, we got to go see a neurologist. So we proactively made our own appointment with a neurologist who did an MRI of Eden's brain. And that night, the neurologist called us at home at 9:30. And when the phone rings at 9:30 at night and it's a doctor on the other side of the phone, your heart immediately drops. I'll never forget, he said, "I don't know what it is, but whatever it is really bad. And you guys need to be prepared for the worst." We didn't know what to do. That night, all we could do was stand over Eden's crib and cry. So the neurologist ran a number of tests, and all of those tests came back normal. So he referred us to a geneticist. The geneticist ran a number of tests, and all of those tests came back normal. And we thought, maybe Eden will be the 1 in a million. Maybe she'll turn out to be okay. Maybe this is just a bad nightmare and everything will turn out fine. Then the geneticist called us one day and he said, you know, there's one other thing I want to test Eden for, and it's a Jewish genetic disease. And we said, oh, Dr. Fernhoff, don't worry about that. It's not going to be that because, you see, we've already been tested for Jewish genetic diseases. And he said, well, let me just tell you a little bit about it. And before we hung up the phone, we knew that was it. So we took Eden back to the geneticist. He drew more blood. And for 2 grueling weeks, we hoped and prayed that this wasn't the answer. But on August 25th, 2009, Eden was diagnosed with mucolipidosis type 4, or ML4 for short. Doctors say that children with ML4 will never learn to walk. They'll never learn to talk. They'll go blind by the time they're about 12. They'll have a maximum mental capacity of about 18 months, and they'll only live until early adulthood. How could this be possible? We ask to be screened. Well, the reality is, our doctors had no idea what to screen us for. And neither one of our two rabbis ever mentioned Jewish genetic disease screening in our premarital counseling. Today, there are 19 Jewish genetic diseases that are known and preventable. It's just a simple blood test. And 1 in 4 Ashkenazi Jews are carriers for at least one of the 19 known preventable Jewish genetic diseases. 1 in 4. In this room, that's the first 3 rows sitting right here. 1 in 4 is a carrier for at least one of the 19 Jewish genetic diseases. My daughter, Daddy's little girl, the love of my life, she's not going to go to first grade. She's not going to go to college like other kids. She's not going to walk down the aisle, and she's not going to have kids of her own because we weren't screened properly. If both partners in a marriage are carriers for the same mutation, there's a 25% chance that any of their pregnancies could result in a child with a Jewish genetic disease. So, Caroline and I have created ourselves in ways we never even imagined. In addition to taking the best possible care of Eden, and she receives 15 hours of therapy every single week. She's working on standing right now, and she's making great progress, and God willing, she'll get there. Not too long ago, she learned to sit up on her own. She was almost 4. So we're hoping she'll stand. But we felt a responsibility to save other families from a similar tragedy. We felt an obligation to change the world. And I, like many of you who raised your hand, believe that one person can change the world. We know that man was created in God's image. And Pirkei Avot goes on to say that it's indicative of a greater love, that it was made known to us that we're created in God's image. So we're privileged not just to be made in God's image, but to have been told by God that we are created in God's image. And Rabbi Avraham Twersky comments, if we are aware of our greatness, it would make us humble, because we would realize we haven't fulfilled our potential. I believe that fulfilling potential is about changing the world. Every single one of us here today can create something and can change the world. In response to Eden's diagnosis, Caroline and I founded Jewish Gene Screen. We founded it to educate rabbis and to educate doctors, to meet with young people, couples and singles. As you heard earlier, we've sponsored hundreds of events around Atlanta. I've spoken across the country at shuls and at conferences and conventions just like this one. Because you rabbis are an important bearer of our message. Virtually none of the young couples that you're counseling for marriage, whose marriages you will officiate, have been screened for all 19 Jewish genetic diseases. And virtually none of the couples in your congregation that are currently having their first, second, third, fourth child have been screened for all 19 Jewish genetic diseases. I remind you that I have a healthy 6-year-old. If you have healthy children, you still have an obligation to be screened. I'm just a simple guy from Atlanta. I'm a CPA, a regular guy. But my family is changing the world. And the trick is how? Changing the world means not being afraid to fail. Changing the world means not being afraid of whispers, not being afraid of shame. Changing the world means being willing to share your story, and most likely, to cry in front of a room full of strangers. Changing the world means building community, collaborating, listening. Changing the world is inspiring others to join you. Because you see, one person can change the world, but he can't do it alone. When we first learned of Eden's diagnosis, we started brainstorming. How could we save other families from a similar tragedy? Within 2 weeks of Eden's diagnosis, we were in Dallas, Texas, seeing the foremost specialist on ML4. And I remember sitting in the lobby of our hotel at 1 o'clock in the morning as Caroline and Eden were sleeping upstairs. And I was on the phone with my best friend in Atlanta, wondering, how will we solve this problem? A problem I didn't even know I had 2 weeks before. Caroline and I, along with a group of close friends, started thinking about different ideas. How could we make a difference? Our first initiative was to create a pledge for rabbis to sign that said they would not marry a couple unless they first had been screened for what was then 16 Jewish genetic diseases. Many of you in the room here today have signed that pledge. Many more of you have agreed to make sure that couples were screened. In fact, I sat in Elliot Dorff's living room while he signed the pledge in Los Angeles. While we knew that that initiative would have some measure of success, we also realized we needed a more comprehensive answer to the question of solving the problem of Jewish genetic diseases. And so, through additional brainstorming, Jewish Gene Screen was formed. You never know what life has in store. For almost 20 years, I've been in the business community, I've been in the Jewish community, I've served on almost every board of not-for-profits here in Atlanta in the Jewish community, Federation, Jewish Family and Career Services, Hillel, American Jewish Committee, among others. I never knew that that was really to prepare me for what came next. You see, I always thought that my legacy to the Jewish community would be a guy who volunteers, he serves on boards, consummate volunteer, he's always there. I never realized that my legacy to the Jewish community would be one of the people who helped solve the problem of Jewish genetic diseases. I turned to my network and I met with people who could help us frame the opportunity of Jewish Gene Screen. The concept is very simple. Just educate people about the need to be screened for 19 known preventable Jewish genetic diseases. Thankfully, our city is blessed with some wonderful philanthropists, Bernie Marcus among them. Bernie understood that this was a problem we could solve. Now, our Jewish community has lots of problems, and we can't solve them all. But this is a problem that we could solve. So, with the support of the Marcus Foundation I searched for an organization that was already doing something in this space. I found the Victor Center. They had been around for many years, but had never really created something as comprehensive as what we had in mind. So it was the perfect shidduch. With their experience and my drive to solve this problem, we were the perfect match. The best inventions, as you know, are often the simplest. We weren't reinventing the wheel. We were just telling people what they needed to know. Reaching people where they are. Marketing to them in ways that they would hear. Using social media to our advantage. The businessman in me saw an opportunity to create competition and increase volume of genetic disease tests. So what we wanted to do was to get competition among the laboratories to bring the price of screening down. When we started our program, the cost of screening for the 19 diseases was over $5,000. It's a lot of money. Today, if you have insurance, regardless of whether your insurance policy covers these specific disease screens or not, if you have insurance, without any philanthropic dollars attached at all, you can be screened for a max out-of-pocket cost of $25. $25. It's less than the cost of lunch at this conference. $25. I'm sure the lunch is delicious, by the way, in case the caterer is in the room. So we created competition, and we've used, in just less than 2 years, 4 different laboratories, because different laboratories have come up with the different lines of thought of how they could reduce the cost. We've also increased the volume. So we're attractive to these laboratories who want to run more and more of these screens. There's huge profit margins for them. And so they see us as a great partner because we're actually increasing the volume and bringing the price for our consumers, for the Jewish community, down. We hired staff. We have Nancy Citron here with us today, who runs Jewish Gene Screen in Atlanta, a fantastic resource for any of you who have questions. But we hired staff, each with their own responsibility, to reach out to rabbis every day, to build those relationships in our community. Staff to reach out to doctors every day, so that when patients come to their office, they know exactly what they're supposed to tell patients. Doctors now actually have on their intake forms questions about your ethnicity, about your religion, about your heritage. They never had those before we started talking to them. We hired staff to specifically reach out to young people, young families, young singles, meet them where they are. We hired a marketing company and specialists in social media. We designed brochures, and I'll tell you that in Atlanta, for each of the last 2 high holiday seasons, every single rabbi in town understood how important this initiative was and agreed to place our brochures on the seats of their shul for Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. We distributed 18,000 brochures each of the last 2 years at 40 synagogues across Atlanta. Now, try to get a whole bunch of rabbis to agree on any one thing. I'm speaking to a group of rabbis. I'm sure you understand how difficult that can be. But all of the rabbis in town realized that this was an important initiative that they didn't know anything about, and that their congregants didn't know anything about. We partnered with APAC to pass out brochures at the end of their community event. We partnered with State of Israel Bonds to put brochures on tables at their bond dinners. We set up tables at Purim carnivals and at mikvah brunches because we want to meet people where they are. People will listen. You just have to tell them what they need to know. This past year, we sponsored 7 community screenings here in Atlanta. And as you heard from the introduction, we've increased the screening percentage in Atlanta by an enormous amount. And the truth is, it's probably more than 400% when we take into account the screenings that just happened over the last couple weeks. But 400% is a lot of screens. And God willing, it's a lot of healthy kids. We've already identified 4 couples who unknowingly carried the same mutation for a disease. That's 4 couples who may have children whose lives we saved. Because you see, these diseases are preventable. And there are ways that you can have children of your very own through a process called pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, where the husband and the wife have a child of their very own. You don't have to go from point A to point Z. You just have to go from point A to point B when you're creating something. Then you go to point C and point D. Now, I'm not a patient guy, so I can't believe that I actually just said you don't have to go from point A to point Z, because that's totally against my nature. But it's true. You need vision, you need strategy, and you need the willingness to go step by step to solve the problem. There's one more thing that you have to have when you're creating something. And without this one thing, you cannot be successful. It doesn't matter what it is you're creating. You cannot be successful unless you have passion. You must have passion. Passion will drive the success. Passion will be what gets other people to join you. My passion is from a real life experience. Some people are passionate about the environment or recycling. Okay, I get it. I'm passionate about solving the problem of Jewish genetic diseases. And I promise you that one person can change the world, but only with your help. We need you to join us. We need you to be talking to your congregants, to your own families, about the need to be screened for 19 Jewish genetic diseases. Our story is one of hope. Our story is about giving people hope. Our story is about helping people understand that things will be different and things will be okay. Our story is about helping people understand that they can face whatever it is they're facing. They can create something. They can change the world. They will get through whatever it is they're facing. They can fight the good fight. We're giving people healthcare information. And at the same time, we're giving people hope. We each have the possibility to create or to recreate. And every single one of us here today can change the world. You just have to fulfill your potential. So, on the way home today, flying to whatever city you live in, I want you to think of a few things. Number one, I want you to remember that 1 in 4 Ashkenazi Jews is a carrier for at least one of 19 Jewish genetic diseases. I want you to remember that if you have insurance, you can be screened for a max out-of-pocket cost of $25. And then I want you to think, since you are created in God's image, and since you can change the world, what did you do today to fulfill your potential? I think saving a life through Jewish gene screen goes a long way to reaching your potential. So I'm delighted to to be here with all of you today, to share our story, to share the story of creating Jewish Gene Screen. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on how we created Gene Screen, on issues relating to Jewish genetic diseases, on issues related to our family in particular. There is no question that you can't ask. I am an open book on all of these topics, and so please don't be shy. If you think your question is too personal, I'll tell you now it's okay. Feel free to ask it, and I'll stay for as long as anybody would like. I do know that there's already questions in your mind about pre-implantation genetic diagnosis and how families can have children of their very own. So I'll address that first, and then I'll welcome you to please come with any questions that you have. Pre-implantation genetic diagnosis is where a woman goes through an IVF cycle, and she produces a great number of eggs. The man's sperm then fertilizes those eggs outside the womb, and at 5 days, the laboratory takes one cell from an 8-cell embryo, tests that cell for the disease. Then they know which embryos are healthy and which embryos are affected with the disease, and they implant only the healthy embryos into the woman. It is an amazing procedure. It's one that is done every single day in every city across the country. It's one that has absolutely no halachic issues, and it's one that provided us with a baby whose name is Shai Emunah. I don't need to tell you that her name means gift of faith. She is our gift of faith. And Shai was born in February through PGD. Please, any questions, I'm happy to answer. Yes, ma'am.
So first I want to say thank you so much. You didn't give us a chance to respond to you. So
Thank you. Thank you. That's very kind and not necessary. Thank you.
So my question is, I'm so moved by your story, and I would very much like to put flyers on my chairs in my sanctuary for the high holidays. Is that available to congregations outside of Atlanta?
Absolutely. So Jewish Gene Screen is going national this year. Thank you. Thank you for that. It is amazing for me to stand here and be able to say that, because it really is our opportunity to change the world, not just change Atlanta. So we want to bring Jewish Gene Screen to your city. The only way to solve this problem is through a comprehensive answer. It's not solved through one brochure on seats during high holidays. It's not solved through one guy giving a talk one time to a group of rabbis at a convention. It has to be very comprehensive. And so we want to bring our program to your city. There is no other program in the country as comprehensive as ours, and so we know that we can make an impact in your city. I would be glad for you to share your information with Nancy Citron, who's sitting in the back. Nancy, can you just raise your hand so everybody can see you? Share your information with Nancy. She'd love to have your card. What city are you in, by the way?
I'm actually in Newton, New Jersey.
Newton, New Jersey. I have friends in New Jersey. I don't know anything about New Jersey. I'm from the South. What do you want from me? But yes, we will be glad to partner with you in your show. Sure. Yes, Rabbi Lebeau.
Just like you just focus for a moment, Randy, on the fact that they don't do pre-implantation. There is also a 3 out of 4 chance of pregnancy and testing like that.
Right. So for those of you sitting in the back who may not have heard the comment, there are many options for couples to consider if they find that they're both carriers of the same disease. Okay? The options are sperm donor, egg donor. For sure they could adopt. Depending on certain halachic issues and your own personal beliefs, you could roll the dice and, if necessary, terminate a pregnancy. I Personally, don't believe that's the best answer. I believe that the best answer is pre-implantation genetic diagnosis because it allows a couple to have a child of their very own. But all of these diseases can be tested for through amniocentesis or a process called CVS, which is a few weeks before amniocentesis. What's important to note is that if both partners carry the same mutation, there's a 25% chance that they could have a child with that disease. Now, I don't like those odds, but you can take those odds and be tested through CVS or amnio and determine whether the child has the disease. Some people have said to me, I'll take whatever God gives me. Okay. I don't think there's a rabbi in the room that would tell you that's the right answer. But if that's your answer, you still have to be screened. And the reason you still have to be screened is because many of these diseases can be managed if you know what you're facing. So children with Bloom's syndrome, for example, should never be put in the sun or have x-rays. Children with a disease called maple syrup urine disease should never eat certain foods. Their diet should be managed. So we want couples to know what they could be facing regardless of what the particular answer is for their family. Yes, sir. Eitan.
You had mentioned that when you were screened, there were 3 and 8, and then it was 16, and now it's 19.
Yeah.
If I meet with a couple, they may not have kids for another 3, 5, and let's say by the time they have their last kid,
Yeah.
it'll be 10 years later.
Right.
How often should we be encouraging these people?
Great question.
With the staff?
Great question. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. When Caroline and I were screened, I was screened for 2 and she was screened for 8, there were 16 diseases that we could have been screened for. So the first issue is educating people about how many diseases. It's not good enough to say, I was screened for the Jewish panel. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Or oh, Randy, I've been screened for all the diseases. Really? How many have you been screened for? People don't know. So the first question is educating people about how many diseases there are. Screening now, because it can be done for $25, boils down to, what was that Nike slogan? Just do it. Just do it. You have nothing to lose. You can be screened today for 19 diseases for $25. It doesn't matter where you are in your relationship, whether you're single, you're already married, you're having your first kid, you're not having your first kid. Just get screened. It's that simple. So I always believe that you should get screened as soon as you understand that you need to get screened, but for sure should get screened before you get married. Why before you get married? Because that's the time in your life when everything is going on. What's the most important thing in your life before you get married? The florist, of course, right? Or the band, or the caterer, or the hall, or maybe sometimes even the rabbi. It's true, guys. I'm sorry. But add this to the list. Make this one of those things that you have to get done before you get married. Because once you get married and you buy a house together and you start to think about having a family, you've already forgotten that you were supposed to get screened. So do it before you get married. Now, it's true that many couples may not have their first child for a number of years, or that they've had a child and 5 years later they're having a second child. So we believe that we should be counseling young couples to make sure before they have their first or second or third child that there aren't additional diseases that have been identified or screens for diseases that have been created so that they've been screened for the maximum number of diseases that they can be screened for. Again, there were only 16 diseases available when Caroline and I got married, and today they're 19. So if today someone's been screened for 19 diseases, and God willing they have a healthy child, 2 years from now they're ready to have their next kid, they need to know, check our website, see if there are any additional diseases that they need to be screened for. Yes, sir.
If you already replied to this question, but a couple of Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews, do they need screening at all?
Yes, they absolutely need screening. I think the more important question for them is, what do they do for Pesach? Because that is probably one of the biggest issues in their family. Yes, they need to be screened. And all of the diseases that we're talking about are found most prominently in the Ashkenazi world. But all of these diseases exist in the non-Jewish world and in the Sephardic world. We have a higher occurrence rate for those of us that are Ashkenazi, but all of these diseases exist in the general population. If you're Sephardic, you also have specific diseases that you need to be screened for, and they're specific to your country of origin. So Cedars-Sinai in LA, for example, has the best Persian panel that you could want because of the Persian population in LA. If there's a Sephardic couple, we want to be able to direct them to the right place in the country for the specific screen that they need. There are many people in this country that are Sephardic who have a parent or a grandparent that was Ashkenazi. So when I go to Sephardic synagogues and I ask, how many of you are 100% Sephardic? You know for sure every single one of your grandparents and your great-grandparents and your great-grandparents, they're all Sephardic. Very few hands go up. So yes, that couple needs to be screened for all of these diseases. And because screening is only $25, I'll tell you that the medical answer is only one of the members of the couple needs to be screened. Because if they're not a carrier for the disease, there's absolutely no way that their child could have a disease. My answer to that question is both people in the couple need to be screened. Why? Because you build family history. What if I didn't get screened? I couldn't tell my brother that I was a carrier. I couldn't tell my first cousins. This is building family history that's important to them. I might not save my child's life, but what if I save my brother's child's life? So build that family history by having both members of the couple screened, whether they're Ashkenazi or Sephardic or not. Yes, sir, in the back.
With that in mind, should older individuals who aren't planning on having any more children also get screened?
Good question. I get this question a lot, and the answer really is no, okay? If my parents who are not having kids were screened, it could mean that their kids didn't need to be screened if my parents weren't carriers of the disease. But there are too many factors going on here. We want to screen folks of childbearing age, basically 18 to 40, okay? In many cases, it's hard to get both parents screened. So best to have the couple of childbearing age screened. Yes, sir.
If we lived in a place like Long Island,
Is that pronounced Long Island? Is it Long Island?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
There's Long.
Got it.
There is a genetic screening program that's there, and how does this work with our local agencies? Is this something that simply works through your physician regardless of your medical plan? How does one go about accessing?
Tell me the program on Long Island that you're familiar with.
There's one at the Long Island Jewish,
Okay.
LIJ,
Right.
has a program that they brought in rabbis to educate us.
Right. So one of my goals is to make sure that any group in the country that's working towards screening folks for Jewish genetic diseases knows that they need to be screening for 19 Jewish genetic diseases. I also want to share information with them about laboratories that we've used. Now, there are a lot of hospitals around the country that are doing these screens. There's a group in Chicago, there's a group in Phoenix, there's this group on Long Island that you're talking about, all fantastic folks. There's collaboration among all of the organizations. I know that the Victor Center has already been in touch with Long Island Jewish, helping them get up to speed on the 19 diseases and helping them understand who we're working with to bring screening down to a manageable cost for people. So if there's anybody in particular that you know at that program that we should also know, I'd be glad to meet with them, but I do know that the Victor Center in Philadelphia has spent time with Long Island Jewish.
But I'm not sure I got the answer. I mean, the couple, or I decide to get all my USY kids to go through screening for all the young families in the congregation.
Mm-hmm.
How do they access that? Through their own physician? or through a,
The best thing for them to do is to go on to our website, jewishgenescreen.org, or go to the website for the Victor Center for the Prevention of Jewish Genetic Diseases. They could go through their physician, but unless Long Island Jewish or another program has reached their physician, I can tell you their physician doesn't know what to screen them for. So I would drive them to our website or to the Victor Center's website, and we'll be in touch with them. They can send us an email. We'll be in touch with them until we bring our program to Long Island and have a more comprehensive answer for you, like we hope to have in Newton, New Jersey as well. That's the best way for them to get screened.
thank you.
Sure. One more question? Anybody else? Great. Well, sure. Yes, sir.
In addition to putting out brochures, what we've learned here today, in some of our areas, I'm in the New York area, are there speakers available to help to young families,
Sure. Yeah.
PTAs or other sessions?
There are
Part of the strategy to-
There are speakers that will be welcome. They'll be glad to come and speak to your group, whether they live in New York, whether they live in Philadelphia. I live here in Atlanta. It's a very easy flight. I speak all across the country, and I would be glad to join you or your congregations for Shabbos or for any other speaking opportunities. But for sure, there are lots of folks, including Rabbi Lebeau here, who would be glad to come and speak to your congregation, to PTA, to whatever. Sure.
To Randy,
Thank
to
you.
the Victor Center, to the, in New York, I know for the Jewish Genetic Disease Consortium of the Federation, there are people working and ready. I just want to say that it is now part of the program with the Jewish Theological Seminary, Rabbinical, and Cantorial School to have a program of training. We just had our dinner last Wednesday night, the second annual dinner, where all of the information is presented to students about the whole history of Jewish genetic diseases, how they're identified, how they impact couples. I speak on something that I've been doing, I explained to Randy since 1972, approximately, when we began first gay-sex testing, how I speak to couples to make it easier for rabbis. We just did a survey in New York, and there was a shocking number of how few rabbis speak to couples about Jewish genetic diseases. I asked the question in the survey why they did not. They didn't feel comfortable raising an unhappy topic to the couple who was coming to see them about the joy of getting married. There's a way to raise this topic, not as an unhappy topic, but it's the best news that we can give to them, that couples can be in control of their lives, control of their childbearing, and that there are ways that family has spoken so movingly today for us to be able to inform them how they can go forward, establish their families, healthy children, and transform their lives. So that as they plan for all aspects of their lives responsibly, they need to be most responsible in this, the most critical area of their lives as well. So that people are working, talking, speaking, training out in the Rabbinical School, Cantorial School. I'm not sure if they're doing it in secret, but I'll be speaking with Fred Artson about making certain that these programs are available in both of our schools in our movement, and that not a single rabbi will be trained for the future who's both knowledgeable about Jewish genetic diseases, their implications, solutions, and hopefully there will not be a single rabbi who will answer a future survey and say that he or she is afraid to speak to couples. But if anyone needs some help, wants to speak to me about what I've done with over 600 couples in my own experience of planning for marriages, I'd be happy to share why I'm in a comfort zone on this, and hopefully all of us will be. But I want to just thank Randy Gold.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm happy to stay around if you have other questions. Thanks.
Just a wonderful person, and the impact that all of us feel